Hello, everyone, and inside the latest Locked On Canadiens, development camp is underway in Montreal, and even more coaching changes.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1104 of Locked On Canadiens, your daily Montreal Canadiens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every single day of the week, whether that be on Google, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, or on youtube.com. You can subscribe for free on any of those platforms. I am your host, Scott Matla, and today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And if you download the Game Time app now, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Some terms do apply. I am flying solo once again today. My co-host is preoccupied with something else that is going on, which, everything's cool. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere yet. I promise. Lot going on now that free agent frenzy has, like an Elden Ring status effect, wound its course down a little bit. We used a clarifying bolus, and we are good to go. The madness and frenzy is over a little bit. We're going to talk about some of the remaining free agents later on in this episode, but the biggest thing that is happening right now is Montreal Canadiens development camp is underway. Some teams started on the 1st, obviously it being Canada Day in the Great White North, meant probably not the Canadian team starting that day. And the Canadiens have their 30-man roster at development camp. And the biggest thing out of all of this is that there are only 13 of the 30 players invited were drafted by the Montreal Canadiens. There's a very good reason behind that. And the European players are likely not coming as to not interrupt their summer training program for their professional teams in Europe right now. So Ivan Demidov is still in Russia, actually probably flew back after the NHL draft. Is there? Atos Koivu is still in Finland. Oliver Kapanen is in Sweden, or back in Finland, training for his potential year in the SHL. He will come over for regular training camp. Adam Engstrom will be over for rookie camp. David Reinbacher, had played a lot of hockey last year. They said, hey, just stay home and relax. Evgeny Volokin is still in Russia, despite his goaltending coach being one of the guest coaches invited to this training camp, which is a weird little mix on things. Obviously, Bogdan Konyushkov is also back in Russia getting ready for the KHL season. And also in here, you don't have some of the other newer pieces here. Lane Hudson, despite potentially wanting to go, was told to take some time. He will be there for, I assume, rookie camp and obviously for training camp for the Canadiens. Luke Tuck is not on this roster either, which was a little bit surprising to me. I thought for sure he would have potentially been there because Jacob Fowler is here, being one of their top NCAA free. Well, Tuck now a professional player, but I'm now seeing, Jacob Fowler is on here. So a lot of the real top side of things, not that there aren't good people here, we're going to get into that, are not participating in this. So I'm not taking a ton away from development camp, nor should you take a ton away from development camp. This is a really good chance just to kind of see, where are these players at? How are these players doing? Of the drafted players who are there, you have Owen Beck, Philip Eriksson, Michael Hage, Sam Harris, Ben Merrill, Logan Sawyer, Tyler Thorpe, Florian Xhekaj. There is a very, very interesting player, two, I think, that are catching my eye in the forward group that I will get to in a moment. On defense, Rasmus Bergquist and Luke Mittelstadt, Owen Protz are the drafted options on defense. And then all four goalies, Emmett Croteau, Jacob Fowler, Quentin Miller, and Mikas Vekvanis are all at this camp. And for all the drafted pieces here, all eyes are going to be on Owen Beck. I think everyone knows how good Owen Beck can be and is at this point, especially after a huge playoff and Memorial Cup push with Saginaw. I think teams are very aware of what he can do, and I think fans are really excited about that. Michael Hage being the new first-round pick, obviously with Ivan Demidov back in Russia right now, he's going to be getting the eyes here as well. this is someone that I am actually really excited, and I hope he shines in this camp after missing a chunk of last year with a shoulder injury and then coming on real strong the back half of the year. I think all eyes are going to be on them and also on Jacob Fowler. Jacob Fowler is a goalie who is seemingly following in the footsteps of Caden Primo at the NCAA level and just winning as much as possible in his first season, and will likely make that jump sooner rather than later. On defense, I'm very interested to see what Owen Protz brings to the table here. Just because reading his description, I'm interested to see what he can do. The big thing here is, and quite literally the big thing here, there's a lot of very interesting pieces for camp invites. And the big one is Justin Leroux, someone that David St. Louis of Elite Prospects, formerly of Habs Eyes and the Prize, pointed out as someone they kind of liked in his draft year. Not a super high pick, but maybe worth the punt later on in the draft. In 67 games for Victoriaville last year, he put up 80 points with 38 goals, 42 assists, a huge spike from the 24 points he had the year before. And he led his team in scoring, led them in scoring in the playoffs with 16 points in 14 games. And the reason why he wasn't drafted, he's 5'9", 165 pounds. As we've seen in this draft this past year, shorter players, unfortunately, kind of got passed over for that. But the Canadiens remedied this. There are a lot of large dudes in this camp. Some of their AHL invites are also very interesting. Israel Mianskum, who they signed already, is going to be in the AHL, ECHL system for at least 2 years. Stands 6'2", 202 pounds. Really interested to see where he goes. They saw a lot of him with Joshua Waugh. And the other name here that stood out for me because of where he played and his relation, Kent Hughes has a lot of ties to, I believe it was St. Andrews, where I believe his sons went. And then he really loves to kind of pick through the U.S. high school system, especially in the Northeast. He's done this a lot, and it's not always a bad thing. But also on the camp invite list is 6'2", 209-pound Connor Arsenault from St. John, New Brunswick, Canada. Left winger, put up 60 points in 53 under-18 AAA games last year with 134 penalty minutes. Also put up 14 in 12 games in whatever the PHC is with 44 penalty minutes. This is a dude who likes to get after it, apparently, and we're going to find out how much of his game is just taking penalties and scoring because he's big. He was on the same team as Bruins draft pick Dean Letourneau, who went in the first round. I have every thought in my head is that the Canadiens were looking at Dean Letourneau and were in this area, maybe scouting. I believe it was Ben Merrill who they picked as one of those guys that they went, well, it couldn't hurt. He's 18 years old, just turned 18 in March. We'll be heading to Cornell next year, so 2024, 2025, to play in the NCAA, where I imagine they will keep an eye on him. And I just want to take a look. Ben Merrill played at St. Sebastian. So I screwed up my St. whatever high schools there. St. Sebastian is the one where Ken Hughes' kids went. But this is someone that maybe if they were potentially scouting them out in any way, shape, or form, they were in that region. They have scouts who cover the Northeast, whatnot. I imagine they would have crossed paths here. Obviously, Merrill is invited to this camp as well before he heads off to Penticton and to the BCHL. I know a lot of people are probably disappointed, like, hey, we were really hoping to see maybe Lane Hudson and see Adam Engstrom and everything. A lot of these guys are guys or players who have played professionally already and that probably don't need to go to this rookie camp or this development camp, so to speak. It's not going to be the high, not that the scrimmages later on this week are ever of super high quality, mind you. And I'm completely forgetting. I had one name left on this, and it's important is that the Canadiens invited Alexander Zetterberg to their camp as well. 5'8", 159 pounds, probably why he was passed over in the draft here, ranked by all the major sources. And Zetterberg is someone that I really hope they would have taken a swing on. He put up 58 points in 45 games in the under-20 league in Sweden last year, put up 39 points in 24 under-18 international games for Sweden, 5 points in 4 games at the under-18 World Championships, is heading to Boston University next year, where the Canadiens are going to get a real good look at him all the time as he squares off with Jacob Fowler multiple times. This is the exact kind of guy I want to see invited to camp. They can't sign him to an ELC, obviously, because of his NCAA status. But Alexander Zetterberg is one that I'm keeping my eyes on, that if he starts tearing it up in the NCAA, he's going to get more and more popular. And we've seen how undrafted free agency can really kind of just crank things up a little bit. However, with development camp starting, there were developments in the Montreal Canadiens coaching saga, including some changes and a couple in our brand new hire in player development. We're going to get into that coming up next. But first, as I said off the top of the show, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and it's the middle of baseball season, and there's nothing better than a cool summer night, a cold beverage, and some baseball at the park. And guess what? You can make it so much easier now with Game Time because their tickets are cheaper closer to first pitch, and they have the lowest price guarantee. They take all the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can look it up on Game Time, find the game you want to go to, watch the Blue Jays lose by 7 to a last place team again, but you're going to get a great deal, and there's no hidden fee. So when you go to select your seats, you can see exactly where you are sitting when they get struck out 9 times in a row. And guess what? No hidden fees at all. The price you see is the price you are paying at Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Some terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and with development camp underway, the biggest development so far is that the Montreal Canadiens, the NHL team, are now down an assistant coach. Alex Burrows announced today with the team that he was taking a step back from the team this year. He will still be with the Canadiens and more on that, but he will not be on the bench for the Montreal Canadiens next season. He is wanting to spend more time with his family, so he is stepping out into a player development role now. So he is signed on to be as part of that team that also features Paul Byron and Francis Bouillon and Marie-Philippe Poulin and Adam Nicholas, etc. A team that is already working very hard and getting the Canadiens to that next level that they need to be at. He will join that, and I think that's actually, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, I think that's a much better fit for Alex Burrows in the Montreal Canadiens organization rather than a power play coach. This is a guy with Alex Burrows who battled his way up at every level to eventually end up on the top line of a powerhouse Vancouver Canucks team with the Sedins, where maybe he was the trash man a little bit, but you don't make it all the way up into the NHL by sheer dumb luck. And part of that comes with developing and learning and growing. And to put a guy like him in a spot to work with younger prospects, guys that are potential longer shots who need to figure out what can I do to make this team. I think Alex Burrows is a really, really good fit for that role. And it allows him the time with his family. He's still a relatively young guy by NHL coaching standards, that it allows him that time. And he gets to join now Lauri Korpikoski, who you will remember as an older NHL player, which I want to say it was the Coyotes, but I definitely want to make sure I have that correct there. He was drafted, came in with the Rangers, played with the Phoenix Coyotes for a while, went to Arizona, Edmonton, Dallas, Blue Jackets, went over to the Swiss League, played a couple of years in Finland, another year in the Swiss League, retired in 2022, 2023, playing for TPS Turku in Liga in Finland there. Been around for a while, 132 points in 609 career NHL games. For me, he's now heading up part of the European player development, which is somehow something that slipped my mind that, hey, that makes perfect sense. Why have the Canadiens not done that before? And I got to say, this is a really smart move because Montreal is investing a lot, even more so now than compared to before. They're investing so much of their future in these players in Europe. And instead of trying to send people over who, might be working in North America normally, he is there now, stationed. I don't know if he's going to build his own team out and other people are going to be there, whether it's working with the scouting staff or someone else within the Canadiens organization, but they now have a dedicated piece in Europe. And I think that's a really smart move going forward there. So he can check in on guys like Atos Koivu and Ivan Demidov, Oliver Kapanen when he goes back, Bogdan Konyushkov, etc., that he is in the area and he can check in on these players and maybe help get them to that next level, whether he's dropping in for practice or if they're off for a week or whatever reason it might be, working with them to get them to the next level. The biggest thing is this now leaves the Canadiens with a vacancy on their bench, in addition to the 2 vacancies in Laval, where they need a head coach and an assistant coach as well. And there was a rumor of potentially needing another coach there, as Martin Leperrier might have been going to join Patrick Waugh's staff in Long Island. I have not heard anything further on that. So as it stands right now, the Canadiens need a head coach or need an assistant coach for Alex Burrows, a head coach and a assistant coach in the AHL. A lot of people said Guy Boucher for any of these roles, actually. And anyone who watched Toronto's power play last year, I don't know if that's quite the way I want to go. It wouldn't be the worst thing I've seen, but in Alex Burrows' role, I want to see if he was really the one coaching the power play, in which I've heard conflicting things. It was Martin St. Louis was doing it. It was Trevor Letowski. It was this. Somebody tell me who it was. I know it's not Stefan Robida. I know Stefan Robida is very likely coaching the defense is what he was doing. Just like I know Kelly Buchberger was working with the defense in Laval. I want to see them hire somebody who has a smart mind to utilize some of the current players on this team a little bit more efficiently. And I admittedly don't know a ton of what those coaches might be there. I look at St. Louis. They just hired Claude Julien, who is a very decorated long-term coach in the NHL. He won a Stanley Cup. He's won a lot of games. He's now below Steve Ott, of all people, on the St. Louis bench. I'm interested to see who's out there because I imagine that role will get filled soon. And I'm also wondering, is this an internal hire? Somebody from player development? I know it's not going to be Francis Bouillon. He already said he hates being behind the bench, but I am again coming to the conclusion that I would like to see Paul Byron fill in that role in Laval as the assistant coach. I still think Pascal Vincent is the top option for the head coaching position there. I think he's done a very good job. But they did mention in, I believe it was Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon, when they were asked about it, said, we don't mind hiring out of junior. And I think they're kind of letting the dust settle a little bit from the draft. They're going through interviews. They interviewed a coach from the German league, which I think is really going outside the box, which is what I want to hear. I want to hear that they cast their net wide. Because when you tunnel vision here, you limit what you might be missing on the outside. There might be that next guy that, he has changed how this works and how we're going to get through this. I'm hoping we get news on that soon, especially because they're starting to sign AHL players. What does the coach need to really get this team where it needs to be right now? With JF Houle, the players they have signed, I absolutely understand where they were at on things. But now things have tweaked a little bit. I don't know what the head coach is going to want, what kind of style of hockey they are going to play. That's the hardest part for me. I'd gotten very accustomed to the Joel Bouchard, JF Houle style of hockey. A new coach is going to come in. I assume they're going to want them to mimic what Martin St. Louis does. Okay, that's good. Now let's see, what kind of vets do you need? AHL free agents are still out there. That's an entire separate thing. They signed 7 of them yesterday. Technically, 8 if you count Alex Barry-Boulet, to start reloading that team a little bit. But without a coach, it's hard to know who's going to be fitting in where. 3 defensemen signed. Some of those are probably going to go to the Lions. And you have a lot of young guys. Find a coach who can juggle young guys getting that development and step forward, but also you want to win games. This is a team that I think desperately wants to get back towards that Calder Cup final. They were a game away against Springfield 3 years ago. 2 years ago? 3 years ago? 2 years ago. It was fantastic. Crowds alive. It's a different thing for this team. They want to get back there. There's not going to be many players left from that team, mind you. Mitchell Stevens has moved on to Seattle. Toby Paquette-Bisson has moved on to Tampa Bay. Jesse Oloinen has moved on to Tampa Bay. Various AHL vets have moved all over the place, including Alex Belzile, who has now moved on to the Rangers organization. There's a lot you can do. It's kind of a wait and see. I'd really like to see them really go for it. If they're not going to hire Pascal Vincent, whose name I haven't seen a ton, I've seen a lot of ties to junior coaches. I'm hoping they find someone who fits the program, basically. Continue that pipeline that these players play in this system, and when they go up to the NHL, it's here. And on the NHL bench, get someone creative. You have a lot of talent coming into this power play starting this year and next year. You're adding Lane Hudson this year, adding Kirby Dach back again this year, getting Joshua Watt at the NHL level this year. You're potentially adding Ivan Demidov next year. You're going to have another year of Lane Hudson. You're going to continue to tweak things. So get creative with it. Speaking of getting creative, free agency is hit its lull, but hey, are there any free agents left for the Montreal Canadiens at this point? We are back here at Locked On Canadiens, and don't mind my water. It has been hot, and I have been walking the dog for several hours today. Not several hours in a row, but you get what I mean. Anyways, the Canadiens have been a very quiet player in NHL free agency, and rightfully so. They were a team that didn't need to go out and spend a ton on 4 and 5 year contracts, which Kent Hughes said as much. Now it comes, what are you picking off the second wave here? Guys like Nate Schmidt are getting signed. You're seeing Cam Atkinson, who got bought out, getting signed. Jeff Skinner got signed late last night. And I'm looking at currently the free agent list on Cap Friendly before it goes dark. Just the unrestricted free agent. I haven't touched on offer sheeting because I don't want Carolina to get mad at me and Tom Dundon to mail a turd to my house. I'm looking at the unrestricted free agents. I have them sorted by points last year. Joe Pavelski leads this with 67 points in 82 games, but he is likely retiring. I was crossing him off the list anyways. He's 39 years old. Right behind him is Vladimir Tarasenko, 55 points in 76 games, 23 goals, 32 assists. He was traded from Ottawa to Florida for next to nothing at the trade deadline and then won another Stanley Cup. And my first thought is, I could absolutely get behind that, but I look at how his time went in Ottawa last year and wonder, is this really what the Canadiens need? I think that he would be a fantastic add. And then right behind him is Daniel Sprong, 27 years old, right wing, left wing, one of the most, and I say enigmatic in the most polite way possible. Put up 43 points in 76 games, 18 goals, 25 assists. Every time it looks like he's going to put it together somewhere, he doesn't, and it falls apart and he goes somewhere else. I'm not looking at defense. So I'm not looking at Justin Schultz. I'm not looking at Kevin Shattenkirk. I'm sure as hell not looking at Mike Hoffman. Former captain Max Pacioretty at 35 years old is an unrestricted free agent. 4 goals, 19 assists in 47 games for the Capitals last year, obviously coming off a pretty major, significant injury. There is an interesting one, though. Former 4th overall pick, guy who promised to fill the net against the Montreal Canadiens because they didn't draft him. Philip Zadina was not qualified by the San Jose Sharks. Minus 44 in 72 games. Admittedly, the Sharks were not good last year. JD, I love you, but you know this. 13 goals, 10 assists. Is this somebody that you think, oh, maybe I can take a swing on this? Maybe there's something there. Maybe I can send him to the AHL if he's not working out at the NHL level. It's something that I think is worth looking into. But I think the Canadiens, if they're going for a guy on a 1 or a 2 year deal, they're going to go Tarasenko or Sprong. And I think that's the way that I would go. A guy you can put in that third line role, get a little offense out of that, maybe a second power play unit kind of thing, and really do some work with them. I'm not saying they're going to be a superstar, but if you can do what you did for Sean Monahan and kind of revitalize their career, you flip them immediately. Because Zadina kind of draws the line where it starts to get iffy. Kyle Okposo, very likely, I would assume, retiring after winning a Stanley Cup with Florida after a long tenure in Buffalo and Long Island before that. Blake Wheeler coming off a broken leg, 21 points in 54 games, 37 years old. Cal Clutterbuck, the human hit machine, 36 years old. Michael McLeod, not qualified, Hockey Canada case. Brian Suter, Jack Johnson, no. Kyer Yamamoto has fallen off a cliff. And then it's into fourth liners and older players here. Guys like Tyler Mott, Jared Tenorti, Gustav Lindstrom, again, no thanks. And I wonder then if that they take a swing at one of these guys here. Because Kent Hughes still said they did want to add if it made sense. And I absolutely think that Vladimir Tarasenko or Daniel Sprong on a one-year deal, if you can shift other salary around or out. It's the second day of free agency. It's not even over yet at this point. So I am very, very curious what Kent Hughes has cooking because he's been quiet. Yeah, there's the Slavkovsky extension. Yeah, there's the probably working on Caden Gooley and Arbor Jackeye extensions, etc. But this is a team that when things get quiet, I wonder what Kent Hughes is up to. And and of course, now that I've recorded this, Vladimir Tarasenko is going to sign with like Columbus for a year at like 3.75 or something like that on a reasonable deal after winning the cup. And then they'll put him next to Sean Monahan and just kind of let them cook. The fact of the matter is that it's getting real quiet now. I think you're going to see a lot of tweener signings or a guy that might be a fourth liner, top liner in the AHL for the Canadiens, and AHL contracts. You're not going to see, I think, a lot of entry-level deals for any of the new guys. Adam Jiricek just signed his for St. Louis, so I'm not expecting the Canadiens to do this because Michael Hage can't sign his. He's going to college. Ivan Demidov has a contract in the KHL, cannot sign his entry-level deal until that is over with, and everyone else is still raw and unproven from the draft class. I doubt that they'd be like, Atos Koivu, you just got here, here's an ELC. And they've signed the pieces from last year that they wanted to sign, like Florian Jekai. Some of the other guys are still playing in college. David Reinbacher is signed already. Jacob Fowler can't be signed. I think that they're betting a lot on their internal spots filling in here. They want these young guys to seize these spots. They don't want to have to stopgap it if they can help it. Because as of right now, the Canadiens don't need to put Carey Price's contract on LTIR, which is the first time in a long time. And that's a huge boon because as they get closer, the closer they are to the cap and then put it on LTIR determines how much extra cap space they get out of that. And for the Canadiens and Ken Hughes, they're got to be smart with it. They don't want to overspend and then have to make a panic move to make things work here. I don't know if there is going to be a trade. I've seen Matthew Joseph and Radek Faksa just traded for future considerations. I don't think they're willing to let Josh Anderson go for future considerations unless they are getting rid of everything at once. I will happily take future considerations because that opens a spot for some other young guys. But to answer my own question here, are there any top free agents left? You got Tarasenko and you got maybe Daniel Sprong, and that's really about it. And that's not the end of the world for the Canadiens, but we'll see what they do. It's an early week. It's quarter to 8 when I'm recording this, so a lot can happen by the time that I finished editing and posting this. If any breaking news happens, we will be on top of that for tomorrow night's episode. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Canadiens wherever you get your daily podcasts, Google, Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube.com. We are free on all of those platforms. Follow us on Twitter at @LO_Canadiens, LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com for all of your questions. You can follow myself at Scott Matlaw on the app formerly known as Twitter. We will be back tomorrow night. Talk more development camp. Talk whatever else is going on in the world. Until then, thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.